When the character Boba Fett was first introduced to us almost 40 years ago, this was the only collectible available to fans. Now jump forward to 2018, this is the type of Boba Fett collectibles they're now producing. And just look at it, it's huge! Boba Fett is by far the most celebrated bounty hunter in the Star Wars universe, and fans seem to gravitate towards this character, including myself, which is why I've held on to the original action figure for all these years. But now that I'm older, I've moved on to bigger collectibles like this guy, the XM Studios quarter-scale Boba Fett statue. Now, this piece is actually the first statue released from XM Studios' Star Wars line, and I have to say right off the bat that there's a lot I like about the statue, but at the same time I think that improvements are needed with the smoke on the base and just the overall paint application. Now I'm going to cover that all in this review, but first let's just take a closer look at the general concept and design of the statue. Here we have Boba Fett with his jetpack ignited and firing weapons from both hands. The spirit of the statue seems to be all about confrontation. This is Boba Fett in full attack mode. Now, in the Star Wars cinematic universe, Boba Fett is usually the composed, stoic mercenary. But this is certainly a more dynamic comic book rendering of the character. And with the statue, we do get two official display options. The first portraying Boba Fett firing his two small blasters. The second display option includes Boba Fett's larger EE-3 rifle and his extended flamethrower, which is entirely sculpted. Now, all of these swap-out arms are interchangeable, so the display option that I prefer is the one shown here, with Boba Fett grasping his infamous EE-3 rifle in his right hand, and then he has a smaller blaster pointed upwards in his other hand. And I find that both these weapons are executed a bit better than the flamethrower, and in my opinion, this is the most menacing display option. Now, just to switch over to the paint application, I think that getting the weathering done right on this statue is critical. And I find that the weathering was done the best on the helmet portrait. So I'm going to delve into that in the next section. So the helmet portrait comes as two separate pieces. We have the helmet and then we have Boba Fett's rangefinder. Now the rangefinder is not posable. It remains in a fixed upwards position. But more importantly, I have to point out that, I find that the rangefinder is not that solid. It's made of a very lightweight PVC material, and because its connection to the helmet is not magnetic, it's just a simple groove, I find that the connection on my statue is quite weak. And I've noticed that other collectors have pointed out the exact same issue on their piece as well. Now with that being said, let's move to what I really do love about the helmet portrait, and that is the paint application. Now you can see here that the entire helmet is surrounded by dents and scratches which fit really nicely with the whole scavenger bounty hunter motif. And the rugged design is the Boba Fett that I remember from my childhood. And even though the helmet has this metal facade, the texture of the visor has a slightly polished finish. And I'm really happy with the paint and the entire sculpt of the helmet. And it's perfect except for that rangefinder. So one of my favorite attributes of Boba Fett is his Mandalorian armor, and on this statue I think that they've covered the essence of that armor pretty well, and it's all fully sculpted. And here you can see that they've included the chest plate or chest armor, the pouches, the cargo pants, the gauntlets, the jetpack, and even the Wookiee braids. Now when it comes to the Wookiee braids, I'm a bit conflicted. On one side, I really appreciate the fact that it's made of this malleable PVC material, which of course reduces the chances of breakage. But then at the same time, I think it's painted a bit too cleanly. I think it should have been a bit more worn out and tarnished. Now, speaking of tarnish, let's focus on the chest armor. You can see that it's riddled with bullet holes, which is really cool. And the damage on the chest plate is quintessential Boba Fett. But unfortunately, this damage effect was not applied to most of the bodysuit. Now, the paint application on the cargo pants is a bit one-dimensional. Now, if more shading was added to the body outfit, I think that would have definitely elevated the entire statue. Now, what I do find impressive, the sculpt is incredibly detailed. Wrinkles have been incorporated into the cargo pants, the knee pads are intricate, and even the stitching has been sculpted into the pouches. Okay, so let's move away from the Mandalorian armor to the weapons. And here you can see that I've swapped out Boba Fett's EE3 rifle, and now he's wielding his two smaller blaster-type weapons in both hands. And, I really like the vibe of these two weapons. It sort of gives the feel of a Western shootout. And, these two blaster-type weapons are actually not identical. They have their own characteristics. But this weapon here is the Westar 34 blaster. Now it has a dull metallic finish. Now of his two blasters, the one that he's wielding upwards is the smallest. But the weapon that is packed with the most detail, without a doubt, is the EE3 rifle. The ridges run all along the shaft of the rifle, and my favorite feature is the sculpted viewfinder. Alright, so the final weapon offered on this statue is probably the most controversial, and that is the flamethrower. To assemble the flamethrower, it contains a metal rod that must be inserted into the gauntlet. Now, I know this sounds cliche, so please don't hate me for saying this, but I do think that the flamethrower looks better in person, and it's definitely better than I expected. Just the sheer size of the flame is pretty impressive. It extends approximately 10 inches outwards. But this is still not my favorite display option. I think that there's just so much going on with this statue that, the size of the flame just overwhelms the overall design of this piece. Okay, so far we've covered the portrait, the body armor, the weapons. So now it's time to take a closer look at the base. So the base on this statue has generated a lot of discussion within the collecting community, and I think that almost any collector would agree that its design is pretty ambitious. Now the base is supposed to depict the smoke exhaust coming off of Boba Fett's jetpack, and the smoke is surrounding this pedestal. And I think that the pedestal is supposed to represent a ship, probably Boba Fett's Slave One ship. Now let's take a moment to focus on the smoke. Many collectors have expressed their issues with the smoke based on this statue, and I have to agree that there is room for improvement. The simple gray tones just blends everything together as one giant mass, and it prevents you from enjoying the elaborate sculpt of the clouds. Now the fire from the jetpack is also a missed opportunity. It has just a straightforward paint design that unfortunately it comes off as more as a column rather than a rocket ignited. Now XM Studios lists the weight of the statue as close to 40 pounds, and it certainly feels like 40 pounds. Alright, so finally I want to bring to your attention the podium. Now the podium, I believe, is really the best element of the base, mostly because of all the mechanics and gears that surround it. And at the very back of the podium are two panels. The largest is adorned with the Mandalorian symbol. Alright, so even though I had these issues with the base and the paint application, overall I think that the dynamic action pose makes up for those flaws, at least in my opinion. This pose is just full of energy and it's aggressive, and this is the only Boba Fett statue in my collection where he's utilizing his whole arsenal of weapons. Now, does this mean that this is my favorite Boba Fett collectible? Well, not exactly. This little guy here is still my favorite, and even though he's banged up, he still reigns supreme, at least just for sentimental reasons. So I want to take this moment to ask you, what is your favorite Boba Fett collectible and why? Make sure to share and comment below. And on that note, I want to thank you for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Take care.